The letter arrived without a return address. Only my name on the envelope, written in unfamiliar handwriting, and inside, a key to the house in Sanchwe. That very house I swore I would never return to. 10 years ago, I fled my hometown, leaving behind a broken heart and family secrets that still haunted me. Artistic fame came to me unexpectedly. All I was trying to do was pour onto canvas the things that tore my soul apart, the things I wanted to escape but could never truly run from. Every brushstroke was like a moan of memory, sorrow, nostalgia, and pain for what was lost forever. Or so I thought. But now this strange key lay heavy and cold in my palm, like a shard of the past. Along with it came a note, just one line: "It's time to learn the truth about what really happened." My hometown, Sanchwe, lies on the southern coast of Korea. I once loved its beauty, turquoise sea, sandy shores, and green hills rolling like waves. But from a certain moment, from the day I was forced to leave, memories of Sanchu became nothing but pain. Too much here was bound to what I had lost. And to whom I had lost. For 10 years I told myself my parents had done the right thing, taking me to Seoul for the sake of a greater future. That the Kim family, Sun Woo's family, was never a match for us. That our young love was nothing more than childish foolishness, destined to fade away like every other fleeting passion. But then why had my parents been so terrified of that bond? Why did my mother cry at night, and my father hint at some old debts that might resurface because of my relationship with Sun Woo? And above all, who had sent me this key, and why? I turned the note in my hands, studying the neat characters. The handwriting was feminine, but certainly not my mother's. Maybe a neighbor's? Or... A sudden thought chilled me. What if it was Sun Woo himself? No, he never wrote so beautifully. But what if he asked someone else to write it? 3 days of tormenting doubts later, I finally got into the car. The plan was simple: go there, sort out the house that had somehow passed to me after my parents' deaths, and find out who had sent this mysterious message. And then, leave again, return to where all those old stories remained nothing more than blurred sketches in my memory. At least, that's what I hoped. But the moment I stepped out of the car in front of the old house, my heart clenched so tightly I instinctively pressed a hand to my chest. The small porch, the familiar wooden door with its copper handle, the rose bushes along the fence, everything rose before me like a dream from childhood. Taking a deep breath of the salt-filled ocean air, I closed my eyes for a moment and... It felt as if I were that young girl again, slipping out the door to run to her first love. What am I thinking? I chided myself softly, breaking free from the vision. I braced myself and walked to the door. The key from the letter fit perfectly, the lock clicked open as if it had been oiled just yesterday. Strange. The house had stood empty for 2 years, since Mother's death. Inside, the living room looked almost the same, only the furniture was cloaked in dust. But when I approached the old dresser, I froze. On top of it lay an envelope. Thick, yellowed with age, with my name written across the front. It was my father's handwriting. Inside were black and white photographs and a letter that began, "If you are reading this, it means it's time to learn the truth about why we didn't allow you to marry Sun Woo. And about the price we paid for our silence." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. One photograph showed my parents in their youth, standing beside a man and a woman I recognized as Sun Woo's parents. They were smiling, their arms wrapped around each other, like the closest of friends. But what had bound them? And what had happened to turn friendship into such hatred? And most of all, was Sun Woo still alive? And what would he think, knowing I had returned? Outside, dusk was falling, shadows of the past filling the house. I realized that once I opened that envelope, I could no longer simply leave. Too many questions demanded answers. And perhaps, somewhere in this town, still lived the one person I had never stopped loving, no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise. That first night in the house I felt like a ghost of my own youth. The house seemed to breathe with me, floorboards creaked, shutters rattled in the wind, pale reflections from street lamps slid across the walls. I lay in my old room, on a surviving mattress I'd found in the storeroom, listening to every sound, trying not to think of Sun Woo. But his image inevitably rose in my mind, especially when I closed my eyes. It had all begun so innocently, so beautifully. We were classmates in high school, I, forever awkward, dreamy, sketching in my notebook instead of taking notes. He, respected by everyone for his kind nature and willingness to help. No wonder Sun Woo was captain of the basketball team. There was always warmth around him. We first grew close when he asked me to help design posters for the tournament. I remember that day in every detail, our laughing eyes over markers, my paint-stained fingers that he carefully wiped with a damp tissue, and the unspoken thrill that stirred inside me. I tried to push those memories away, reminding myself the past was over, that he surely had his own life now, just as I had mine. But memory, as if to spite me, kept replaying the film of our moments, from our first kiss beneath the cherry tree branches to the tearful goodbye when I was forced to flee town at my family's insistence. I still didn't know the full truth of what had happened then. My parents swore it was for my own good, for the great future that awaited me beyond our provincial town. And his family, from what I knew, had supported the separation. No one wanted us together. Falling asleep was hard, but eventually I drifted into a restless slumber, only to be awakened at dawn by the sharp cries of seagulls outside my window. I had dreamt of school, of Sun Woo, of us running from someone through pouring rain. Waking brought pain and a strange yearning. Still, rising from bed, I told myself firmly, I had a goal, to sell the house. That was what mattered. I had to deal with it, find a realtor, patch up the worn-out walls, show it to potential buyers, and return to Seoul. Thinking this, I headed to my parents' bedroom to check if anything valuable remained. The moment I cracked the wardrobe door, an avalanche of memories fell upon me, my mother's neatly folded clothes, several of father's suits hanging, and at the very bottom, a box of old photographs. My heart clenched when I saw those familiar faces, my parents by the sea, myself as a little girl with braided hair, and Sun Woo beside me, holding my hand. We must have been about 16 then. I set the photo aside, struggling to hold back tears. Why had I come back for so long? Why hadn't I simply entrusted everything to an agent? But the answer lay within. I needed to put an end to it myself, break free from the chain of memories, and move forward. The hope of release from the past was what kept me going. During the day, I decided to walk through the town center. I needed to buy some food, a few cleaning supplies, and also visit the real estate agency. The thought of explaining my situation to a realtor made me uneasy, but what I feared even more was running into familiar faces. Too many here remembered me, and I didn't want to answer the inevitable questions. How are you, Jeon? Why did you leave? Are you back for good? As I approached the small shop near the bus stop, someone suddenly called my name. I turned, and in that instant my heart nearly leapt from my chest. Standing before me was Kim Sun Woo, the very one I had tried to erase from my life. He looked a little different from my memories, but still unmistakable. The same warm eyes, sharper features now, and in his posture a quiet confidence, the bearing of a man who had achieved much. Jeon? He repeated in surprise, and for a moment I glimpsed the same boy who once anxiously waited for my call. So many years have passed. I felt everything inside me tighten, my legs turn weak. I thought I had prepared myself over these 10 years for everything, for scorn, for cold indifference, for painful memories. But I wasn't ready for one thing, the softness of his voice, tearing at my defenses from within. Sun Woo, I breathed, forcing myself to sound calm. Yes, I came back. Just for a while. To take care of some things with the house. He nodded, shifting his gaze away, as though afraid to meet my eyes directly. Perhaps it was hard for him too. I see. I heard about your parents. He trailed off. Clearly, he felt awkward speaking about my family and my mother's death. My condolences. I only nodded, unable to speak. Perhaps I should have said thank you, but the words stuck in my throat. How are you? He finally asked. I heard you became a well-known painter. I gave a bitter smile. Yes, that's true. I paint, I exhibit. That's wonderful, he said, glancing at me again, a faint tremor in his voice. I always knew you had talent. Suddenly, silence fell between us. It seemed even passers-by could hear it. Time itself paused, staring at us, taunting with memories. At last, I forced myself to break the tension. I should. I began, then faltered, unable to finish. How foolish it all sounded. Listen, I don't want to hold you up, well. I was searching for words to leave, to flee. Cowardice? Perhaps. But I couldn't help it. Nodding, Sun Woo said, I understand. A lot of time has passed. My life has changed too. I have a family. A wife, children. I nodded, not even trying to hide the tremor in my hands, and murmured distractedly, yes, I heard. I'm very glad things turned out so well for you. Maybe. He hesitated, looking at me uncertainly. Maybe we could meet sometime. Talk. You know, just as friends. There's so much left unsaid. We both knew how risky just talking was, but I couldn't bring myself to be rude and refuse. Somewhere inside, a naive hope stirred that a conversation might help us finally set everything straight and leave the past behind. Yes. Let's, I forced out. Though I'm not sure it's a good idea. But maybe we both need to close this chapter, as psychologists say. He gave a sad smile. All right. I'll call you tomorrow. I gave him my number. He quickly typed it into his phone and said goodbye, turning away hastily, as if afraid his eyes might betray some secret. When he disappeared around the corner, I found myself standing in the middle of the street, clutching my chest, trying to understand why my heart was pounding as if I had just run a marathon. I made my purchases as planned: floor cleaner, simple food for dinner, a few candles just in case. The electricity in my house hadn't been checked yet, and I was afraid something might short out. But everything felt dreamlike. That first encounter with Sun Woo hadn't just unsettled me, it was as if it had cracked open a door to the time when we were still young and believed in miracles. As I walked back, a few townsfolk greeted me, raising their brows in surprise, asking when I had arrived. I replied politely, evasively. Returning here felt like stepping onto shifting sand. Every step threatened to pull me deeper into the past. The closer I came to the house, the more uneasy I grew. It seemed the walls were whispering, and the whisper said, "You think you can erase everything?" But the past casts a long shadow. I tried to shake off the emotions closing in on me and busied myself with cleaning. Mechanical scrubbing of dust and dirt, washing the floors, it helped me distract myself. I tried to imagine I was just working part-time as a cleaner, someone for whom it didn't matter that there were ghosts within these walls. But each room carried its own story. For example, my childhood bedroom. I remembered how my father built me an improvised easel, nailing a board in the garage and fastening wooden slats to it. That's where I first started painting with oils. Or the kitchen, the place where my mother and I talked about my dream of entering an art school in Seoul. And then the fireplace hall, where I once hid in Sun Woo's arms so my parents wouldn't notice how we kissed late at night, when I was supposedly already asleep. Brushing away a cobweb in the corner of the living room, I suddenly noticed that the old clock, which once kept time, had stopped, the hands frozen at 12:07. Perhaps that was the moment when my time in this house stopped forever too. Toward evening, the phone rang, and I flinched, shaking all other thoughts from my head. The number was unfamiliar, but I guessed it might be the call. "Hello," I said, a little tense. "It's me, Sun Woo," came a quiet voice on the other end. "Sorry if I'm disturbing you. I just wanted to know how you are. And to arrange a meeting. You said you were free in the coming days?" "Yes," I said, hiding the nervousness in my voice. "But maybe we could meet somewhere outside the house. A cafe, perhaps?" I deliberately suggested neutral ground. We both understood that meeting at my place or his would be too intimate, and I didn't want to become the subject of whispers or spark gossip. Small towns, they're all eyes and ears. All right, let's do that. There's a quiet spot by the waterfront, opened about 3 years ago. It's called Sanchu. They mostly serve seafood. Maybe we could meet there tomorrow, say, at 5 in the evening? I agreed, noting to myself how quickly he spoke, as though trying to avoid pauses. Perhaps this conversation was just as hard for him as it was for me. After hanging up, I sat down on the sofa, hugged my knees, and stared at one point. Trying to sort out what I felt, I realized it wasn't fear, nor anger, it was a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. I wanted to know how he lived, why things had turned out the way they did, and whether there was any chance of one day letting go of what still hadn't quieted inside me. But I also realized something else: all this could affect his family. Perhaps I was endangering his marriage simply by being here. If things were good for him, did I even have the moral right to intrude on his life again? But after all, I hadn't asked for this meeting, he was the one who reached out. Or had I somehow, unconsciously, pushed him toward it? Those questions kept circling in my head, refusing to let me rest. Late that night, I lit a couple of candles to create at least a trace of coziness. I sat on the floor by the window, watching the sea, a gray strip bathed in moonlight, and wondered how I could untangle this mess. I had come here to sell the house and leave. But running into Sun Woo had made my heart beat with the dangerous rhythm of hope. By noon the next day, I couldn't sit still. My nerves were frayed, and I realized I needed a release. I decided to take a walk along the shore. On the way, I tried to listen to the sound of the waves, the cries of the seagulls, breathing in the warm, salty air. It calmed me, at least a little. When I came back to change before the meeting, it was already nearly dark. I arrived at Sanchu a little earlier than planned. Inside, it was a cozy cafe with wooden tables and elegantly presented seafood sets. I chose a table by the window overlooking the bay and started scanning the menu to distract myself. But I noticed how nervously my fingers trembled. When Sun Woo walked in, I saw his reflection in the glass right away. He looked calm, but his eyes betrayed unease. We greeted each other, exchanging awkward smiles, and sat down. "I'm glad you came," he began, trying to sound confident. "How was your day?" "Oh, you know. Busy with the house," I replied. "Full of dust and memories." He nodded and smiled faintly. "I can imagine." We placed our order: small portions of sashimi, a seafood salad, tea. Silence hung for a few seconds, but soon I decided to speak. "Let's talk about everything that happened. I think we both need that." Sun Woo ran a hand through his hair wearily. "Yes. My mind has gone back to that time again and again." A bitter wave of emotion surged inside me. "Sun Woo, you know, I still don't understand the whole truth. They took me to Seoul, told me I needed to focus on my studies and career. They said our relationship had no future because—" I faltered, remembering my father and his words: "Sun Woo's family will never let you grow, they're too traditional." He sighed heavily. "My parents. They were against you. Not because you were bad, but because they feared that life with an artist would be unstable, without guarantees. My mother and father wanted me to marry a girl from a more practical family, with a stable income and the same conservative values. And your parents, I suppose, thought I couldn't give you prospects. Something like that. My father believed that an artist had to study abroad, work with galleries in Seoul and Europe. He thought I would wither in our little town. And besides—" I felt a lump in my throat again. "He didn't consider your family worthy. I'm sorry if it sounds harsh, but my relationship with my father was complicated. He always wanted the best for me, but his way of getting it was harsh." Sun Woo lowered his gaze to his cup. "I see. So our families did everything to separate us, and we were simply too young to resist." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of resentment toward our parents and regret that I hadn't been brave enough to take my fate into my own hands. Tell me, how did you live afterwards? I asked softly. He shrugged. It wasn't easy. I lost you, went through that pain. Then I entered university in the next city, came back here, found work in the local administration. I met a good woman, Park Hyun, we got married. Now we have 2 children. Boys. Young Hyo and Young Min. They're 8 and 5. A warm smile spread across his face. They're wonderful. I felt a pang of jealousy and guilt. I'm happy for you. Truly, I said. Sounds like things are going well for you. He gave a crooked smile. You know what the problem is? On the surface, everything is right, stable. But sometimes at night I wake up and remember your smile, your determination, how you painted outdoors. And it feels like I lost something very important in my life. His words pierced me, my heart skipped a beat. But I had no right to respond, no right to feel joy at his confession. He was a married man with a family, and we had met only to close the wounds left open. Or had we? At that moment, the waitress brought our food, and we paused, pretending everything was fine. But Sun Woo's words kept echoing in my head. The evening seemed to fly by in a single conversation. We reminisced about our past, funny school moments, the plans we once made, to rent a modest apartment together and live creatively and freely, as though the whole world were at our feet. We joked, we laughed, but in both our eyes I felt an uninvited sorrow shimmering. As we were leaving the cafe, he asked, "Shall we take a short walk along the waterfront?" I agreed. I didn't want to leave, and I knew I was dangerously delaying the moment of goodbye. We strolled slowly side by side, the wind tugging at my hair, the moonlight dancing on the waves. Sun Woo talked about his children, about how the older one had taken an interest in drawing, and I listened, smiling, imagining through his eyes a future little artist. He's like you, he said quietly. Every time I see him with a pencil and paper, I think of you. He must be talented, if you say so, I replied gently. We stopped at the end of the pier. Silence fell. He stood beside me, but I could feel his awkwardness and deep sadness. Well, I should probably head home, he finally said, looking at me intently. Thank you for tonight. I'm glad we talked. Me too, I replied. Take care of yourself and your family. Looking into his eyes, I felt tears rising in my throat. Too many emotions flooded me, regret, longing, tenderness that still smoldered inside me. But I couldn't help either him or myself. He averted his gaze with effort, gave a short nod, turned, and walked down the pier toward his car. I stood there for a few more minutes. Only one question echoed in my mind: why couldn't we be together? Isn't love the most important thing? But life, as always, had turned out far more complicated. When I finally walked back, the moonlit path on the water seemed like a road into the past, while reality was pulling me toward the future. A week passed, during which I busied myself with the house. The real estate agent I'd contacted came by a couple of times to inspect and clarify details. He said, the house is in a good location, but it'll need repairs, otherwise the price will be lower than you'd like. I nodded, pretending to be fine with it, but honestly I felt something strange. From the start I had been sure I wanted to sell the house. And now my heart seemed to protest. During those days, Sun Woo and I didn't see each other. He only called a couple of times to ask how I was doing, and I tried to answer curtly, to keep from fueling the storm inside me. Yet I caught myself waiting for his calls. And sadly, waiting with a flutter of excitement. One evening, I picked up my brushes again. I needed to finish the painting I had started back in Seoul, but I couldn't find the right idea to complete it. I had tried to depict a girl in a ballet tutu, balancing on the edge of a cliff, with the endless sea stretching out in the distance. But the image remained unfinished, as though I lacked the courage to decide how it should end. Would she fall into the abyss or find her way to safety? I sat on the floor, surrounded by jars of paint, thinking, maybe that girl was a reflection of me. Maybe I'd been balancing all my life between my true desires and the pressure of the outside world. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I got up, set the brush aside, and went to open it, expecting it might be the realtor. But on the doorstep stood Sun Woo. He looked agitated, with a flicker of either desperation or resolve in his eyes. "Sorry to come without warning," he said quickly. "But I had to talk to you in person." My heart sank. I stepped aside, letting him in. My nerves immediately tightened, like taut strings. "Is everything all right? Did something happen?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He glanced around the room, noticed the canvas on the floor. His eyes lingered on it for a moment, then returned to mine. "I need to say this. I know I have a family, responsibilities. And that probably our story should have stayed in the past. But every day since I saw you again, I can't sleep, I can't eat. I don't understand how to live, knowing you're here, and still pretending there's nothing between us." I froze, my soul aching at his words. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I had to be honest. "Sun Woo, I'm confused too. I didn't want to go back to the past, but your presence, your words." I trailed off, feeling my composure slipping. "You must understand, you have a wife and children." "I can't possibly." "I know," he interrupted me. "I know all of this seems wrong. But all these years, I haven't stopped thinking about you. And somewhere deep inside, I never accepted our separation. I love my wife as my own flesh and blood, we raise our children together. But that depth, that passion I felt for you, I've never felt for anyone else." Tears welled up in my eyes, and a storm rose inside me. I didn't want to be the cause of anyone's pain. Yet I couldn't deny it. As soon as he came closer, I felt drawn to him like a magnet. "Do you realize what you're saying?" I whispered. "If you leave your family for me now." He shook his head. "I can't just take and destroy what I have. But I also can't live pretending everything is normal." For a moment, a dreadful silence filled the room. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "Then what can we do?" I blurted, almost in despair. "If we try to be together, we'll cause pain to the people closest to us, especially your family. And if we part again, we'll wound ourselves. Isn't there another way?" Sun Woo exhaled desperately. "I don't know. But I had to tell you that my feelings haven't gone anywhere. I want to apologize for not being able to fight for us back then." I stepped toward him, and he immediately embraced me as if afraid I would vanish. I pressed against his chest, letting the tears flow. There were no words that could fix everything now. But in that moment, I felt only the warmth of his body, the familiar scent, and memories rushing in like a powerful wave. I stood, pressed closely to Sun Woo, feeling his heartbeat. All the resolve I had tried to summon when I arrived in Sanchwe shattered into tiny fragments. When I left many years ago, I had firmly believed that over time, the pain would fade, and the memories would dissolve. But now I understood that it had all been self-deception. Eventually, we slightly pulled away from each other. I looked into his eyes and saw what once burned inside me as well, love mixed with confusion and guilt. Sun Woo slowly removed his hand from my waist, as if unwilling to let go, but knowing he had to. "Sorry," he exhaled, ruffling his hair in that gesture so familiar to me from our youth. "I didn't mean to barge in. I just couldn't bear it any longer." I touched his wrist. It took me a few seconds to calm my wildly beating heart and regain the ability to think rationally. I understand," I finally said. "You know, there's no right or wrong here. We're both prisoners of circumstances created not only by us. Our families, the situations, everything made us strangers for 10 years. He looked at me longingly, as if wanting to say more, but held back. I realized it wasn't easy for him to voice the feelings that had boiled inside for years. "What do we do now?" he asked softly. I ran my hand over my forehead, as if trying to erase the persistent anxiety. I have no idea. I came back to sell the house and return to Seoul. But after meeting you, everything inside me turned upside down. And honestly, I'm scared. He wanted to object, but I took his hand. Listen, Sun Woo. I don't want to be the reason you destroy your family. I know how difficult it is to raise children, how serious their responsibility is. You are a father, you have obligations. I can't let you give that up. His eyes darkened, pain flashing within them. I understand. But I also can't completely betray my feelings. It's tearing me apart inside. I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. We can't find an easy solution right now. But let's at least promise each other that we won't lie to ourselves. If we are meant to part for good, let it be a conscious choice. And if there is a way to be together. I didn't really believe it was possible, but I finished the sentence. Then we have to be ready for the consequences. He nodded, and a long pause settled between us, filled only by the sound of the night breeze slipping through the slightly open door. I should go, he finally said. Hyun-ae might be worried. Should I call you? Yes, I whispered, lowering my gaze. In that moment, I felt as if I were holding a live wire, capable of burning me, him, and everyone around us. But I didn't let go, because so much tied us to the past. And perhaps, to the present as well. He hugged me quickly one more time, pressing his lips to my forehead, and stepped out. As soon as the door closed behind him, I collapsed to the floor, exhausted, realizing tears were streaming down my cheeks again. I felt like I was inside a storm without end. I hardly slept that night. Memories of our youth, our meetings under the cherry tree, the first confession of love, ran through my mind. I recalled how we sneaked to the seaside, sat on the wet sand, and talked about the future. One day we'll leave for Seoul together, Sun Woo had said. You'll be a famous artist, and I. It doesn't matter, as long as we're together. Back then, it seemed the world lay at our feet. How deceiving it all was. By 3 a.m, my eyes were nearly shut, but my mind kept racing. I wondered if perhaps some of our parents knew darker secrets than merely wanting to separate us over differences in life views. It always seemed to me that their behavior concealed panic, not just a desire for something better for me. There were many questions, but no answers. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed a strange scene. I was in my parents' bedroom, and Sun Woo's father and mother were nearby. They were arguing in whispers, agitated, pointing at me. Then his father suddenly turned and shouted, "Never! She will never be with him." Waking in a cold sweat, I tried to discern whether it was merely a dream or a faint memory. Hard to say. The next day, I decided to do a thorough cleaning of the farthest room in the house, where old boxes were stored. Perhaps there I would find documents or letters shedding light on family secrets. Sifting through a pile of dusty papers, I almost despaired when I found an envelope without a stamp or address. Inside were several photographs and a letter written in handwriting I didn't recognize. The letter contained something like an address to Lee Sung-dae, my father. The text was convoluted, mentioning an undesirable union, old debts, and hidden obligations. I caught a fragment that made me shiver. If the truth comes out, it will destroy both families. The handwriting was sprawling and difficult to read. I could only make out snippets: granddaughter, debt, prohibition. What nonsense! I muttered, struggling to turn the page. But there was no continuation, no signature, just hints and strange phrases. Holding the envelope and photographs, a cold sweat formed on my forehead. It seemed our fathers had some long-hidden secret. Perhaps this was the root of all the hatred between our families, keeping Sun Woo and me apart. But what was this secret? I put the find in my pocket, deciding I should ask old neighbors. Maybe someone knew more about the relationship between my parents and the Kim family. But it wasn't easy. People here were either too silent or too eager to spread gossip. I feared choosing the wrong person and triggering a new wave of rumors. That evening, as I was about to prepare dinner, Sun Woo called. "Hi," he said timidly. "Listen, here's the thing. My wife is going to her parents with the kids for a couple of days. I wanted to ask. Maybe we could meet? I need to discuss something important with you. About our families." My heart jumped. I remembered the letter and photographs and decided it wouldn't hurt to tell him about my find. "All right," I said. "You can come over since you want to talk anyway." "Just." Yes. "I understand, we have to be careful," he muttered. "But if my car's near your house, people will start whispering. Maybe I'll park on the next street and walk over?" I smiled sadly, though he couldn't see it. "Do as you think best. I'll wait." After the call, I sat in a daze. On one hand, I knew that if he came in the evening and stayed, it would give people plenty to gossip about. Small towns, rumors spread like wildfire. On the other hand, I almost didn't care. I craved truth and explanations. And I missed him too much to deny it. When Sun Woo arrived, twilight had already settled outside. I brewed green tea and invited him into the living room, the same one where we had stood in each other's arms the night before. He entered cautiously, but when I closed the door, we both immediately felt the magnetic pull that had existed between us all these years. "Sorry," he began, but I motioned him to stop, feeling that we couldn't waste time on empty apologies. "Let's get straight to the point. You said you wanted to talk about something related to our families?" He sat on the sofa, running his hand over the smooth surface. "Yes. I happened to overhear a conversation my mother had on the phone. She was speaking with some distant relative. I didn't catch everything, but the gist was that there were old dealings between our families, even before we were born. And somehow, these dealings led to conflict." I sighed. "So it's not that simple. I found some letters and photos myself, hinting at the same. They mention an undesirable union and debts. I still haven't figured out all the details." "Debts?" he asked, alert. "You mean our parents owed each other money?" I shrugged. "Maybe, but it seems it was something more serious. There's something about a granddaughter and a prohibition." Sun Woo frowned. "Strange. Maybe it's about you?" "Maybe." I shivered slightly. In any case, this conflict likely caused our separation. Perhaps our parents thought that if the children married, the truth would come out? He leaned forward, as if trying to fit all the pieces together. But what truth? A tense silence filled the room. I caught his gaze and suddenly realized how exhausted we both were from all these secrets. We wanted to know why we had been denied each other long ago, but only sank deeper into conjecture. "Maybe we should ask directly?" he suggested. "Your parents or mine?" I gave a bitter smile. "My parents are gone," I reminded him. "Maybe distant relatives, whom I haven't contacted in years." "And your parents? Are you ready to ask them if they might react extremely negatively?" He paused for a moment, then exhaled. "I can't live in ignorance. We need to untangle this knot. But I'll try to learn more on my own first." I nodded, and we both sank into thought, unsure what else to say. Essentially, all our current problems weren't only because Sun Woo is married and I have my own life, but also due to mysterious events that happened long before us. Finally, I got up and brought our tea from the kitchen. I placed the cups on the table and sat beside him. The distance between us was barely a hand's width. I felt that familiar, aching sensation as my heart raced and blood rushed to my cheeks. He slowly turned his head toward me, and our eyes met. "Sorry if I say this too often," he said quietly. "But I really missed you all these years." My heart almost stopped. "I thought about you a lot too," I said, keeping my eyes on him. Sun Woo seemed to be suppressing his desire, clenching his teeth, but in the next second he touched my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I couldn't resist the feelings boiling inside me, and I didn't want to. We reached for each other, as if granting ourselves permission to forget the painful reality, even if just for a moment. He leaned toward me, and our lips met in a cautious, almost shy kiss. My heart pounded wildly, and warmth spread through my stomach. The kiss was both familiar and new. We hadn't touched like this in so long, yet the memories of our closeness guided our bodies instinctively. I felt the heat of his skin as he brushed my neck, then hesitantly let his hand fall to my waist. I responded by wrapping my arms around him, feeling a spark ignite inside me, a spark I had kept hidden in fear for so many years. My heart and mind argued, it was wrong, he was married, but my entire being surged with a fiery wave, sweeping away all barriers. Maybe we shouldn't, I whispered, but before I could finish, our lips met again. We kissed as if trying to make up for all the lost years. He ran his hand down my back, and I felt his touch awaken a long-forgotten passion. A shiver ran through me, from the tips of my fingers to my chest. Jion. He exhaled, breaking the kiss for a moment to look into my eyes. There was both desire and a plea for forgiveness in his gaze. I didn't answer. I just touched his neck, ran my fingers through his hair, inhaling the scent of his skin. We both knew we were on the edge, beyond which there was no turning back, but neither of us wanted to stop now. He slowly lifted the edge of my blouse, and I felt warm air touch the exposed skin. I didn't even notice the soft moan that escaped me, full of long-held desire and tenderness. It was as if we were speaking a language we had learned together long ago but had not used in years. Sun Woo, barely lifting his lips from mine, began unbuttoning my blouse. My breath quickened, my heart raced like a wild drum. His hands were so warm it felt as if they left marks on my skin. I ran my hands over his chest, through the fabric of his shirt, feeling his heartbeat under my palm. His breathing grew heavier, and he lightly squeezed my waist, drawing me closer. Our bodies searched for the forgotten harmony that had once been broken. When his hand touched my thigh and began to rise slowly, I couldn't suppress a sharp gasp. Our breaths mingled, and the room was dim, with only moonlight spilling through the window, tracing our silhouettes. The rustle of clothing, ragged exhales, and quiet sobs became our conversation, the only one possible in that moment. At that moment, it felt as if we had broken free from the chains of the past, as if no separation had ever occurred. Just the two of us, this night sea of desire, and nothing could part us. Soon, the wave of passion, building with every second, reached its peak. We remained entwined for a while, breathing heavily, trying to reconnect with reality. I rested my forehead against his neck, feeling the waves of pleasure slowly subside, giving way to sharp awareness. We had just crossed the line. He kissed my temple slowly, then lay down beside me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. We lay there, listening to the silence of the night. "I love you," he suddenly whispered. The words were so soft I barely heard them, but my heart answered with a thundering beat. "I love you too," I admitted, but immediately felt a pang of guilt. What about his family, his wife, his children? He noticed my tension, pulled slightly away, and looked into my eyes. "I know. This is wrong. But I can't deny it any longer. I'm sorry if this burdens you." I just shook my head and pressed against him, trying not to think about what morning would bring. Today, we were together, and in that moment, that was enough. I woke to the first rays of dawn filtering through the window. The air still carried the scent of our night and our tangled emotions. I lay on the couch, propped on my elbow, watching Sun Woo sleep. Serene, relaxed, he breathed steadily, as if in a deep sleep. It seemed that at this moment, there was no trace of the internal struggle that raged in his soul. My heart, however, bore a heavy weight. The night's passion had pulled aside the veil on what we had buried deep within, but besides brief happiness, it brought more questions and fears. How could I face reality now? What would happen when he returned to his wife and children? As if sensing my gaze, Sun Woo stirred and opened his eyes slightly. Seeing me, he smiled with warmth that made my chest tighten. I wanted to hold on to this small miracle, the feeling of being together, but reason reminded me that from the outside, it looked like an illusion. "Good morning," he whispered, gently touching my hand. "Good morning," I replied, exhaling softly. We were silent for a while, each processing the events of yesterday. I watched the golden light slip across the walls, over the clothes scattered nearby on the floor. It was as if the night's shadows had transformed into morning rays, and all the magic had dissolved. "I need to get home before my family returns," Sun Woo said, breaking the silence. There was an apologetic tone in his voice. "I understand," I replied, trying to hide the bitter ache in my chest. He sat up and began getting dressed. I felt as if a part of me was being torn away. But I couldn't let my emotions overwhelm me. I had to stay strong. When Sun Woo reached the door, he turned to me quietly. "Sorry if my presence only complicates your life. But I don't regret what happened. I want to understand myself, my feelings, and this secret that binds our families. And then we'll decide together." I just nodded, afraid that if I spoke, I would break down. The next second, the door closed softly behind him. I was left alone in the empty house, which seemed to hold echoes of our nocturnal conversation in its walls. The day passed in a kind of numbness. I tried to take up a brush and sit at the easel to finish a painting, but my hands trembled and my thoughts wandered too far. I decided to focus on something practical. Remembering that I wanted to ask someone about the relationship between my family and the Kim family, I glanced at the clock. It was already noon. Finally, I gathered my courage and went to Mrs. Cho, the neighbor who had once been close to my mother. Her house was just 4 blocks away. Mrs. Cho had always been a curious woman. Perhaps she knew something, or at least had heard gossip. When I knocked, she opened the door herself. At first, she looked surprised to see me, then smiled, but I caught a hint of anxiety or curiosity in her eyes. "Lee Ji-yeon, how long has it been?" she exclaimed, gesturing for me to come in. Come in, come in. How long have you been back?" I entered the narrow hallway, crowded with old cabinets and dressers, and took off my shoes. The smell of old wood and dried herbs stirred memories of running here as a child with Sun Woo. Yes, he sometimes came to Mrs. Cho's too, to deliver something or borrow dishes for school events. I went to the living room and sat on the low, worn sofa. Mrs. Cho hurried to pour me some tea. "I heard your parents passed away," she said cautiously. "My condolences. They were good people, though, you know, everyone has their secrets." I tensed. There it was, the key phrase, their secrets. Perhaps this was what I wanted to ask about. "Thank you," I said, sipping the hot tea. "Yes, a lot has happened. I'm dealing with the house now, planning to sell it." I understand. So many memories, right?" She sighed. "But why did your parents leave when you were still so young? I heard you moved to Seoul and became an artist." I decided to get to the point. "Mrs. Cho, you knew my parents for a long time, and perhaps the Kim family as well, right?" "Of course. Our town is small, everyone knows each other," she said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "What exactly are you interested in?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I want to understand why our families were so hostile. I remember back in school, my parents strictly forbade me from befriending Sun Woo. They said it would lead to nothing good. And I was head over heels in love with him at the time." Mrs. Cho gave a crooked smile, as if she expected the question. "Yes," she said, sipping her tea. "I'm not sure I know the whole story. But there were rumors that when your parents and Sun Woo's parents were young, some matters involving money and inheritance occurred. Allegedly, Sun Woo's father promised to help your father with a business, but then things went wrong. Someone deceived someone or broke a promise, And this led to a lifelong conflict? I asked. Yes, it seems so. But it's not just about money, she sighed. I heard your father was very proud of his roots, and Sun Woo's father was also a principled man. Their personalities clashed. There were whispers about an illegitimate child or some schemes, but who really knows? Her words sent a chill through me. An illegitimate child? Too bold for a town like this, but not impossible. Thank you, Mrs. Cho, I said, realizing my questions had only multiplied. And did you ever hear about any letters or documents? I have a few scraps left, but I don't understand them. I can't say, dear. Maybe your father really was hiding something. He was a complicated man, everyone admitted that here. Mrs. Cho spoke the truth. My father had been strict and stubborn, capable of immense love or ruthless wrath if he felt betrayed. It seemed the family conflict ran deeper than I had imagined. And perhaps that was why Sun Woo and I had been forbidden from being together. After thanking her for the information and tea, I went home. Over and over in my mind, her words about money and inheritance and an illegitimate child echoed. Could this really be the root of all our problems? Later in the evening, I received a message from Sun Woo. We're back with the family. Can't talk tonight, but I'll write when there's a chance. I'll also try to ask my parents about these secrets. I realized that for now, any secret meetings between us were off. We both needed to figure out which way to move forward, and whether it was worth risking the lives and feelings of so many people. But after last night, the memory of his touch still lingered on my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him looking at me, and it made me alternately flush and shiver. Deciding to occupy my hands, I took my sketchbook and made several pencil drawings of the backyard landscape. Nearby, branches of an old plum tree swayed, and just beyond the fence, the ocean stretched into view. I sketched quickly, tracing the contours of the shore, trying to pour out all the chaos inside me. The faster I moved the pencil, the lighter I felt. In the end, the sketch came out surprisingly accurate, as if I had transferred part of my pain onto the paper. But the calm didn't last long. Soon the realtor called. He said there was a buyer ready to come see the house as early as tomorrow. I'll be there by 12, he said. The buyer is a very serious person. Try to be present. All right, I replied, feeling my heart tighten. This meant the sale was more real than I had thought. If the house went into someone else's hands, that would be it. I would go back to Seoul. And perhaps forever. At that moment, I realized I didn't even know what I truly wanted. Selling the house was supposed to free me from the past. But now, having grown close to Sun Woo again, everything had changed. It seemed that everything was tangled together, the secrets of the past, my art, his family, our love, all knotted into something I didn't know how to unravel. The next morning, I tidied the house before the buyer's arrival. I put on light makeup to appear more confident, though inside I felt chaos. Around 11:30, there was a knock at the door. I assumed it was the realtor, but when I opened it, a completely unfamiliar man in his 50s stood there, carrying a large briefcase. Lee Ji-young? He asked politely, bowing slightly. I represent the investment company Chongsang. The realtor and I agreed I would come a little early to inspect the house. I was taken aback, but trying not to show it, I invited him in. The man introduced himself as Park Chu. He was courteous, but his demeanor carried a cold confidence. He surveyed the rooms with a professional squint, noting details, the wall's condition, room dimensions, window placement. I followed silently, answering questions and trying not to miss anything important. Soon, the realtor arrived, a short, thin young man named Lee Chanik. He carried a thick folder of documents, and the jingle of keys on his belt was faintly musical. Well then, Mr. Park, the realtor said as we entered the living room. I hope you like the location. The house does need some renovation, but it has a beautiful plot with a sea view. Yes, it's a nice location, Park Chu nodded, turning his gaze to me. Miss Lee, if the deal goes through, are you prepared to vacate the house within a month? My heart tightened. I had to answer professionally and calmly. Yes, I think I can. I'm currently taking inventory of my belongings, I forced out. He nodded, made a note in his notebook, and headed toward the exit, with the realtor following. Let me know when you're ready to sign the preliminary agreement, he said briefly, nodding. We'll discuss it with my management in the next couple of days. As his car pulled away, I felt I could finally exhale. But instead of relief, anxiety surged. The house might soon no longer be mine. And though I had originally wanted this, my heart now protested. Congratulations, Lee Chanik said, smiling. Looks like you have a serious client. I think this deal could be very profitable. I returned his smile, hiding the storm raging inside. Thank you. I'll wait for news, I said, seeing him to the car. Once the realtor left, I stood in the yard, looking at the old facade of the house. A thought circled my mind. If I sell the house and leave, will I survive this second loss? And will I be able to finally sever ties with Sun Woo? I needed a walk to collect my thoughts. I headed toward the quiet cove, where the rocks jetted over the water, forming a small inlet. There were almost never tourists there. I hoped to be alone with my thoughts. As I approached the water's edge, a wave of déjà vu hit me. This was exactly where Sun Woo and I had sat in the evenings as high school students. I sat on a flat rock, watching the waves quietly break against the rocky shore. Sea foam sparkled in the sunlight, and a thin breeze brushed my face. Should I sell the house and leave? I asked myself. Or stay here, try to fully uncover the secret, sort out my feelings, give us a chance with Sun Woo. But what kind of chance? He has a family. Can I really intrude on their lives and turn them upside down? Sitting there, I realized I had been looking for answers too far away, when perhaps they lay within me. I took out the yellow envelope with photographs and a letter from my bag. I unfolded the photos, studying the faces. Yes, one of them clearly showed my parents, and next to them, a man and a woman strongly resembling Sun Woo's parents. They were all young, smiling, and at least in the black and white image, there was no hint of hostility. Were they friends? I wondered. Maybe in the beginning, everything was different. What happened later? A gust of wind nearly snatched the photos from my hands. I hurriedly put them away and stood up, realizing I shouldn't sit on the rock for too long. The air was getting chilly. A plan formed in my mind. I'll try to speak directly with the older generation of the Kim family. If I had the courage, I would ask them questions to clarify everything. At the very least, if they refused to speak, I would know they were hiding something. The next day, I knocked on the gates of the large Kim family house. I hadn't been here since leaving years ago. Beyond the fence loomed a stately traditional-style mansion, though glimpses of modern updates suggested renovations had been done multiple times. A middle-aged woman opened the door, apparently a servant or distant relative living with them. Seeing me, she frowned, clearly not expecting a guest. "Hello, I need to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Kim, the parents of Kim Sun Woo," I said politely. "And you are?" "I'm Lee Ji-yeon. I used to live next door," I explained. The woman frowned further but eventually led me to a small reception room. I sat on a hard wooden chair, my hands trembling slightly. I waited, unsure how I would be received. A few minutes later, Sun Woo's mother, Mrs. Kim, entered. I immediately noticed that she had grayed noticeably over the years, and her eyes had gained a sharper strictness. Still, her facial features were recognizable. "Lee Ji-yeon," she said, sitting opposite me. "I didn't expect to see you in our house again. What brings you here?" Her voice carried hidden hostility, but I wasn't about to back down. "Hello, Mrs. Kim," I nodded. "I need to ask a few questions about the past. It might sound strange, but I came across old photographs and letters indicating our families were once closely connected. What happened? Why did it turn into a feud? She was silent for a long moment, staring at me heavily, as if deciding whether to speak. Finally, she spoke. You could never trust your father. He was hot-tempered and would do anything for money. My husband. Her voice trembled slightly. Tried to help him. But your father broke the agreement, put the business at risk. In the end, our family suffered greatly. Then someone, no need to point fingers, benefited, and we were left with nothing. I bit my lip, feeling uncomfortable. Hearing my father spoken of that way was painful, but I understood that the truth could be harsh. Then why were you once photographed together, friends even? And what about the rumors of an illegitimate child? I asked. Mrs. Kim's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Rumors? What are you talking about? They say there might have been a secret pregnancy or a child born out of wedlock. It seems far-fetched to me, but still. She fell silent, looking away, her face still stern. I'm not discussing these filthy rumors, she said firmly. My husband was a man of honor. There were no illegitimate children. If your father had affairs, that was his business. Leave our family alone. Her harsh tone stabbed at my chest. So, the path to the truth here was blocked, at least by her will. Then why were you so adamantly against my friendship with Sun Woo? I pressed. Was it really all about inheritance and business? Was it necessary to involve us, the children, in your conflicts? For a moment, I thought she clenched her fists. Go, Jion, she said quietly but firmly. And don't dig into the past. You haven't lived here for a long time and don't understand how much pain it can cause. I felt a surge of resentment. She was practically throwing me out without explaining anything. You don't even want to know why I'm asking? I said, barely restraining my trembling voice. Or what's happening with Sun Woo? I know everything about my son, she interrupted. And I repeat, leave, or it will only get worse. Realizing I wouldn't get answers from her, I stood and bowed briefly, trying to remain polite, though inside I was boiling. Thank you for the conversation, Mrs. Kim. I apologize if I disturbed you. She just nodded silently, signaling the audience was over. I left the house with a heavy heart. Now I was almost certain the Kim family was hiding a major secret, judging by her reaction. But I hadn't been able to learn the truth from her. That evening, I sat in the kitchen, mechanically flipping through my old sketchbook, when my phone rang. Yes, I answered, looking at the screen. It was Sun Woo. Hi, came his tired voice. How are you? I visited your mother today, I said bluntly. Tried to find out what she knows. Sun Woo sighed. And? Did she kick you out? Not exactly, but she made it clear it would be better if I never appeared in your house again. I'm sorry. His voice was bitter. She already spoke to me. She said you came and demanded I don't pry into matters that don't concern me. I gripped the phone tighter. But it does concern you, directly. We're both trapped in this situation. I know. I tried asking my father, but he brushed me off. Said he wouldn't talk about old mistakes and that I should appreciate what I have now. So they're all in on it, I said bitterly. Hiding the truth from us, fearing some scandal. Seems that way. But I'm not giving up. If necessary, I'll find other ways to learn the truth. Maybe there are old documents, letters. Something like that. We were silent. I didn't want to drag him into new conflicts, but I knew I couldn't handle it alone. Sun Woo, how? I hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. Do you still want to be with me? There was a short pause on the other end. Then he spoke, his voice calm but deep with feeling. Yes, I do. I don't know how it can happen, but I want it. And I can't imagine, after everything that happened between us again, just pretending nothing happened. But My children. I can't abandon them, you understand? I understand, I whispered, biting my lip. I don't expect you to leave your family. I'm not sure I want to destroy anyone's life, especially the lives of innocent children. I just don't know how to live knowing we still love each other, yet cannot be together. It's agonizing, he agreed. But let's at least try to uncover the secret that separated us. Maybe, if everything comes to light, our parents will stop interfering. After that, we'll decide together what to do. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. My heart remained heavy, but there was a tentative hope that we could unearth these skeletons in the closet and somehow free ourselves from their hold. Evening soon fell, and I was left alone with my thoughts. The house sank into semi-darkness, with only an old lamp illuminating the living room. I sat before an unfinished painting, depicting a girl in a ballet tutu balancing on the edge of a cliff. Until now, I hadn't known how to finish it. But suddenly, an idea came to me. What if I gave the girl wings? Grabbing my brushes, I began adding new strokes, transforming the background. I painted a stormy sky, dark clouds pierced by streaks of crimson sunset. I made the silhouette of the girl more expressive, elongating the lines of her arms. And I gave her semi-transparent, almost ghostly wings, like wings forming from dissipating mist, as if they had just appeared. With each stroke, I felt myself freeing from the inner tension. It was as if I were telling myself, we all balance on the edge in life, but sometimes you have to take a risk to gain true freedom, to be yourself, to love whomever you want. Hour after hour, I refined the details, and when I finally stepped back to look at the result, I realized this might be one of the most powerful pieces I had ever painted. Despite my exhaustion, I felt a surge of inner cleansing. Through this painting, I had expressed everything I had been too afraid to say aloud. Whatever happened next, I knew there was a strength in my heart that would not let me break. The next day, I received a call from the realtor. He said the buyer was preparing an advance and would like to meet me to sign the preliminary agreement in 2 days. At this rate, the deal was about to go through. I placed the phone on the table and thought, if I accept these terms, in a month the house would no longer be mine. That meant it would be time to leave. Well, maybe that's for the best, I thought. Sun Woo can't leave his family, and I can't stay here endlessly hoping for a miracle. Yet deep down, I felt that until we uncovered the truth, I couldn't fully let go of this place. Let the deal proceed, but there was still time. 2 days until signing, short, but perhaps enough to do something. That evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar woman. Her voice was quiet, anxious. "Excuse me, I'm probably taking a risk," she began. "But you're Lee Ji-yeon, right? The one who returned to our town looking for the truth about the Kim family?" My heart skipped a beat. Who was this? "Yes," I answered cautiously. "But how did you get my number?" "The thing is, I used to work in the Kim household. My name is Miju. I heard you visited and spoke with Mrs. Kim. She got very angry and sent you away. But I know something. I'm afraid if I stay silent, it wouldn't be fair." I swallowed hard. Finally, someone willing to talk. "Please, tell me what you know," I said, trying to steady my voice. "It's better if we meet in person. I don't want to speak on the phone. Can I come to you tomorrow, around 10 in the morning?" "Yes, of course." "You have my address?" "Yes. I just ask that no one sees us together. It could be dangerous for my work end." "Well, you understand." "I understand," I confirmed, though inside I burned with impatience and fear. We said goodbye, agreeing she would come discreetly. After hanging up, I sat for several minutes in complete daze. It felt as if the tangle of family secrets was about to unravel, and my hands shook just at the thought. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, feeling a strange excitement. Around 9, I had washed my face and eaten a light snack. My body trembled with anticipation. What secret could this woman reveal? And won't it just be more gossip? At 5 to 10, I heard a quiet knock at the door. I hurried to open it and saw a short woman in dark clothing, a scarf covering her head. She looked around nervously. "You're Miju?" I asked. "Yes." She nodded and slipped inside. I closed the door, motioning her to the kitchen. We sat opposite each other. I offered tea, but she waved it off, clearly anxious. "Miss Lee," she began softly, "I worked for many years in the Kim household, cleaning, helping in the kitchen. I saw and heard a lot. Of course, I signed various papers obligating me to keep the family's secrets, but I think it's time to tell you the truth." My throat went dry. I forced myself to nod and not interrupt. "Many years ago, your father and Mr. Kim were indeed close friends. But at some point, a problem arose. Sun Woo's father invested money in your father's business. Your father started a major project. But, as they say, he secretly carried out another deal. Unfortunately, the business failed, and Mr. Kim had to cover the debts. He held a grudge. But why such intense hatred?" I whispered. "People argue over money, but that doesn't always lead to forbidding their children from interacting. The thing is, when your father faced near bankruptcy, Sun Woo's father helped him again with another transfer. But in return, as I heard, there was a secret agreement." She hesitated, as if afraid to speak the truth. "What kind of agreement?" I asked, clenching my hands. "Apparently, they intended some sort of marriage agreement," she finally said. "It was about your father." She paused again. I felt my chest tighten. "Please, speak." "There were rumors that your father already had an illegitimate child with a woman who once worked as his secretary," Miju forced out. "To hide the scandal, he allegedly made an arrangement with Sun Woo's father. Supposedly, he promised that when the children grew up, they would marry, uniting the family's assets, possibly covering up the illegitimate child, repaying debts, and restoring reputations. But then your father unexpectedly started to recover independently, and the agreement was broken." "Wait, an illegitimate child?" I whispered, stunned. My heart raced, barely able to breathe. "Yes, that's what the rumors said. No one knew if it was true, but Mr. Kim apparently believed your father used his money and then ran, breaking all obligations. At the same time, they feared that if you and Sun Woo became serious, the entire past, including this story, would surface. Understand? Reputation was extremely important to their families. Everything could have become public." I gripped the edge of the table. The world seemed to tilt. My father, an illegitimate child? Or my father had one? I tried to parse her words carefully. Miju said, "Your father already had an illegitimate child by his secretary. So somewhere, I might have a brother or sister. And all this time our families feared we would expose the story they hid?" I felt outrage boiling inside. So many years I had lived in lies? Miju nodded. "I think so. They also said it was mainly Sun Woo's mother who opposed your closeness, because it would bring the old arrangements to light. She's very proud and believes any shadow on the family's reputation is unacceptable." I sat, trying to digest what I had heard. If all this was true, it meant we were first intended to be married for convenience, and then when the convenience no longer applied, we were separated for the same reason. Deep inside, I felt pain and fury. Could my life really have been dictated by this heartless agreement? "Thank you for telling me," I finally said, my voice trembling. "Do you know what happened to this child?" "I don't know for sure. They say the child's mother's family moved north. Rumors say your father bought them off. The person may be alive, nobody in town remembers. Everything was kept secret." I ran a hand over my forehead, trying to gather my thoughts. "I see. And still, how are we supposed to live with this truth now?" "It's not for me to judge, Miss Lee. But in my view, it's better to know than to live in illusions." She rose as if to leave, adding, I hope you find your path. And forgive me if my presence causes you pain. But I could not stay silent any longer. After she left, I sat at the table for a long time, covering my face with my hands. Illegitimate child. Old debts. Marriage agreement. These phrases echoed in my mind. It seemed that Sun Woo and I were pawns in a game started by our parents. And their plans had brought us misfortune. I couldn't resist calling Sun Woo immediately. He answered in a quiet voice, I'm at work, can't talk long. Is it urgent? Very urgent, I said, my voice breaking. I found someone who revealed the story about the agreement, debts, and a possible illegitimate child of my father. A tense silence followed, then Sun Woo asked, an illegitimate child? Are you serious? Yes, I confirmed. And this explains why our families behaved so strangely. They feared the truth would emerge if we married. I heard him sigh heavily, damn. Mom and Dad definitely know something. They never told me stories like this. But it explains a lot. Sun Woo, I don't know what we should do now. He paused before answering, listen, I'll try to ask our parents more firmly. If necessary, I'll confront them, tell them I know everything. But I'm afraid they may get even angrier. I don't care, I replied, feeling determination rise inside. They've been manipulating us for years, destroying our feelings. If they care so much about reputation, let them learn they tried to hide it in vain. You're right. I'll text you as soon as I speak to them. He hung up, and I realized my hand holding the phone was trembling. On one hand, it was terrifying to confront a generation used to absolute authority in the family. On the other, we could no longer live in ignorance. Something had to change. Since Miju revealed the shocking truth about the old agreement and my father's possible illegitimate child, only a day had passed. But for me, it felt like an agonizing eternity. My heart was heavy, and thoughts rang in my mind. How can I live with this knowledge? Should I continue trying to be with Sun Woo if all our past was a trap set by our parents? I barely ate or slept, wandering aimlessly through the house. When evening came, I decided to step outside for fresh air and walk toward the sea. But as soon as I stepped out of the gate, I saw a car I recognized instantly, Sun Woo's father's vehicle. Standing nearby was Mr. Kim himself, a man no longer young, whose face I remembered from childhood, hard-set eyes, controlled gestures. We had hardly interacted, but it was clear he disliked me. Good evening, Mr. Kim, I said, trying to stay calm. My chest tightened nervously. What is he doing here? Good evening, he replied, bowing slightly but without a trace of a smile. May we talk? I nodded, motioning him inside. We went into the living room. I noticed him glancing around, seemingly assessing how neglected the place was. Finally, he fixed a heavy gaze on me. I know you sought a meeting with my wife and are inquiring about the past, he began coldly. If you continue interacting with my son, I ask you to stop. We do not want scandals. Blood rushed to my face. I was too exhausted to choose delicate words. I don't care about scandals anymore, Mr. Kim. You've hidden the truth for years. Do you think if you step out of the shadows and order me to disappear, I will obey? My voice was sharper than I expected. Too much pain had accumulated inside me. He pressed his lips together. You don't understand what you're asking. Our families have too heavy a history to dig through it now. What are you hoping to achieve? That you and Sun Woo will reunite, ignoring everything else? I want to know why you lied to us all our lives. And why should your son and I pay for someone else's sins? My outrage overflowed. I remembered Miju's words and dared to ask a direct question. Is it really all about my father owing you a huge sum of money, and then a secret agreement was made between you? And it involved some illegitimate child? For a moment, Mr. Kim's eyes widened, then he sighed heavily, as if carrying decades of weariness on his shoulders. Since you already know, listen. Your father was an ambitious man. We did become friends once, combining capital for business. But at some point, he acted despicably. He took extra money from me on his word and invested it in a dubious deal. In the end, I lost almost everything. My wife cursed the day she agreed to my friendship with him. Then the story about his affair surfaced. People said he might have a child, rumors said a girl. Or a boy, no one knew for sure. But your mother, apparently, knew the truth all along and endured it. But what does this have to do with me and Sun Woo? I interrupted. Why were you so against our contact? He gave a crooked smile. At first, your father even suggested betrothing you to Sun Woo in the future, saying the marriage of the children would unite the families, repay debts, and preserve reputations. But when your father managed to get out of debt, while we were left without part of our funds, he suddenly broke all agreements. And then we no longer wanted anything to do with him. We felt betrayed and humiliated. That's why, when you and Sun Woo began to show feelings for each other, my wife and I did everything to prevent it. You ruined our lives, I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. Because of your secrets, we lost each other. Perhaps. But it was necessary to settle an old feud that could have flared up again. Understand, none of us wanted a public scandal. The town is small, and reputation matters for our families. I exhaled softly. So much pain, for pride, money, fear. Hatred filled me, but alongside it came the bitter understanding that the past could not be rewritten. All right, I said, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. Suppose I now know everything. But then tell me, what does the now adult Sun Woo, who has long lived with his family and raises children, have to do with this? What about me, who only wanted to come back and sell the house? Because your appearance stirred old wounds again, Mr. Kim snapped. And I want to warn you, if you continue this relationship, it will not happen without a scandal. Our family will not forgive interference in my son's marriage. At those words, a hot flash of anger and a sharp pang of pain ran through me. Of course, they would protect their honorable son-in-law and father of two. And my feelings? My suffering? They didn't care. Fine, I ground out between clenched teeth. Have you said everything you wanted? Yes, he nodded briefly, heading toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. One more thing. I know your house will be sold soon. Leave. It will be better for everyone if you disappear from Sun Woo's life. I don't want to ruin his career, but for the family, we will take extreme measures. With those words, he left, leaving the house feeling as if a cold wind had swept through it. I wanted to scream, cry, smash something against the wall. Instead, I buried my face in my hands and sank heavily into a chair. Here it was, the true cost of pride and arrogance. Generations had destroyed our fates, hiding behind phrases about honor, debts, and reputation. Another excruciating day passed. I struggled to find strength even for daily chores. Inside, I felt as if walking on a knife's edge. One wrong move, and I'd burn myself and wound Sun Woo. But I could no longer live in ignorance or by someone else's rules. By evening, the phone rang. It was Sun Woo, his voice tense. Jiyeon, I need to see you. Right now. What happened? Hyuna. Found out. About us. My heart sank. I knew it was bound to happen eventually, but I hadn't expected it so soon. Where are you? I asked. I'm in the car, heading to the seaside boardwalk. Let's meet at the old pier. It's usually quiet in the evenings. I agreed, grabbed my bag, and rushed out, trying not to think about the consequences waiting for us. When I arrived at the pier, twilight already cloaked the coastline. The wind howled, stirring the waves. I saw Sun Woo standing by the railing, looking out to sea. I approached, and he turned. The weight of the recent events was etched on his face. In a matter of weeks, it seemed he had aged several years. How? Did she find out? I asked softly, standing close but not daring to touch him. He ran a hand through his hair. As usual in small towns, rumors, someone's guesses. Perhaps the household staff overheard strange conversations, or maybe my mother hinted to force my choice. In the end, Huna figured out I was seeing you. And the way I've changed lately. She understood everything. What did she say? It was frightening to ask, but I had to know. Sun Woo closed his eyes. She cried, screamed. Then suddenly went silent. She said she wouldn't tolerate betrayal, that I had to choose, family or you. I just couldn't answer. The words couldn't answer pierced my heart, even though I understood how complicated it was. And now? I asked quietly, gripping the railing. I don't want to lose my children, Jiyeon. I love them more than anything. They're too young to understand. And he faltered, then looked me in the eyes. I love you, but I cannot destroy my family's life in an instant. There's no simple solution in this deadlock. Tears welled in my throat, but I tried to keep my voice steady. So we have only one option left, to part again? I don't know, he answered, pain in his voice. Did my father come to you? Yes, I nodded, turning toward the dark sea. He told me to leave and not destroy your family. Threatened with a scandal. Sun Woo muttered a curse under his breath. He fulfilled his mission, to scare you. Sorry. It's nothing, I'm used to being intimidated, I said bitterly. Before, they separated us for their secrets, now for your family. He sighed heavily. We both realized we were facing a choice with no good outcome. If we stayed together, we'd hurt too many people, the wife, the children, and we'd be at war with his parents. If we parted, life would return to its previous course, but each of us would lose true love. Let's run away, I blurted suddenly. Right now, just the two of us, and never look back. He smiled bitterly. Tempting, but what about the children? They'd be without a father. I can't abandon them. I bit my lip, realizing it would be too selfish to ask that of him. Then he squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. If we had met earlier, before I married and had children, things could have been different. But now I have responsibilities. And I hate myself for hurting you again. I had no words. We simply stood, holding each other, letting the sea wind brush against us. Pain, regret, love, fear, all mingled into a chaotic cocktail of emotion, making me want both to cry and to scream. The next morning, early, I was awakened by the realtor's call. The buyer was ready to sign the preliminary agreement. I confirmed the meeting mechanically, as if in a dream. My fate seemed to roll along a set track, and I was just waiting for the wheels to carry me to the final stop. After preparing the necessary documents, I went up to my old room where my parents' belongings had once been kept. In the back of a closet, among tattered boxes, I found the family photo album. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I saw my mother, beautiful, smiling, and my father, young and full of vigor. My heart ached with bitter emotion. Why didn't you tell me anything? Why make me a hostage of your lies? But no one was there to answer this silent reproach. Eternal secrets had gone with my parents to the grave. I looked at the photos, my mother holding me in some, my father smiling, clearly proud of the future. Perhaps they wanted the best life for me, but as always, other people's pride, other people's grudges. Ultimately, the drama of the past ricocheted against my present. By noon, I arrived at the realtor's office. The buyer, Park Chu, a representative of an investment company, was already waiting. He looked satisfied. We signed the preliminary agreement, and he handed me the advance. Inside, I trembled, realizing this was a step toward final departure. Congratulations on the deal, Miss Lee, he said, putting the documents away. The remaining formalities will be handled in a couple of weeks. I nodded, unable to smile. Perhaps at that moment, I finally made my decision. I would leave. Maybe it was the right choice. I would let Sun Woo live the life he had built. I didn't want to be the cause of innocent children's suffering. Let only the memories remain of how we loved each other. That same evening, Sun Woo came by. He looked subdued, but I saw determination in his eyes. We stood in the living room, facing each other, not daring to sit. I heard you signed the agreement to sell the house, he said quietly. Yes, I confirmed, lowering my gaze. Probably in a couple of weeks it will be over, and I'll return to Seoul. A tense silence hung in the room. We both understood where this led. I saw his hands trembling, and my insides tightened. So, you've decided to leave my life for good? He asked almost in a whisper. If I stay, we'll only prolong the agony, I replied, struggling to hold back tears. You won't abandon your children, and I can't endure this double life. I don't want to share you with guilt and fear. He stepped toward me, placing his hands on my shoulders. I felt tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry. He exhaled. Sorry for everything we didn't have time for, everything we couldn't overcome. I don't blame you, Sun Woo, I whispered. Our families planted too deep a rift. And yet, I'm glad we met again, even if only for a short time. He pressed his forehead to mine, and we stood like that for a few moments, listening to our hearts beat in unison. I closed my eyes, trying to memorize the closeness, knowing it could be the last in my life. Then he gently pressed his lips to mine, not passionately, but softly, a farewell. The kiss carried the bitterness of impossible love. I wrapped my arms around his neck, breathing in the familiar scent, tears flowing freely. We kissed as we once did long ago, recalling everything that had passed, and knowing we would have to let go. Finally, we pulled apart, and he spoke carefully, if you need anything, money, help, support, let me know. I'll always be there, as much as I can. I only nodded faintly. There was no point in saying anything more. He stroked my hair as if saying goodbye, and slowly turned and left. When the door clicked shut behind him, I sank quietly to the floor and cried for a long time, clutching my broken heart. 3 weeks passed. The sale proceeded in its usual course. I signed papers, packed my belongings, sold some of the furniture. The house echoed with emptiness. Sometimes at night, I thought about leaving soon and perhaps never returning to this small town. Sun Woo did not appear. I did not call him either. I knew it was for the best. Let him stay with his family and raise the children. I, returning to Seoul, could continue my career as an artist. And in my heart. Perhaps the scar would remain forever, but that is life. On the day it was time to officially hand over the keys, I walked through the rooms one last time. I entered my old studio, where the easel stood. On it was the painting of the girl in the ballet tutu, standing at the edge of the cliff, with ghostly wings behind her. I stared at it and thought, perhaps she is me, still believing in the possibility of flight, even when standing at the edge of the abyss. I carefully lifted the canvas from the frame, wrapped it in cloth, and took it with me. I decided that it would go to my future studio, as a reminder that a person, even in desperate situations, can hold on to hope and strength of spirit. Closing the front door behind me, I turned and felt a weight on my heart. How many memories these walls held, childhood mischief, my mother's advice, my father's unwavering strictness. And my first encounter with Sun Woo. My childhood and my most sincere love remained here, on the coast. But I was destined to leave alone. As I got into the car and drove out of town, passing the familiar bay, I suddenly felt the urge to stop. I stepped onto the shore and, gazing at the waves, closed my eyes. Goodbye, Sanchwe. Goodbye, my home, my past, my first love. I don't know if I'll ever return here, but I take with me your scent of salty wind and the warmth of sand beneath my feet. Soon, I left for Seoul. At first, it was unbearably difficult. Everything reminded me of Sun Woo, and the aching feelings gave me no peace. But over time, I gradually recovered, participated in exhibitions, and painted new works. The painting Dance on the Edge, as I named it, drew great interest at one of my solo exhibitions. People even offered a substantial amount to buy it. But I refused. It had become too personal, a symbol just for me. Sometimes at night, I dream of the sea, and I see a figure walking along the shore in the distance. It seems like Sun Woo, just as he was in youth, when we dreamed together about the future, unaware of parental approval, past sins, or inheritance. I wake up with tears on my cheeks. But along with the tears comes a quiet gratitude that we even knew what true love is. And perhaps that is our fate. Not all dreams come true, but some feelings live forever in our hearts. Even if they remain unfulfilled, they shape who we are. And now I know that it is possible to rise from the very edge of the cliff, to spread ghostly wings, and continue the flight, even if it hurts, even if the sky above is dark with storm clouds. For somewhere beyond the horizon, there is always hope for a new dawn.